So I think we are live, right? Yes, we are live. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Varik.Verilion, and this is like the day 3 in a 1,000-day series of, okay, of understanding reality. And like at the day 1, we understood about stocks. At the day 2, we understood about feedback loops. And today is the day 3, and today we're gonna understanding about runaway feedback loops and balancing feedback loops. I think I did explain balancing feedback loop yesterday, but I actually quit it before explaining runaway feedback loops. But because by that time I got tired, right? And because I didn't got a good sleep yesterday night, and even like, yeah, I'm not getting good sleep. Like I just slept like today too, like for like just 5.5 hours, because like my sleep cycle is changing, because I realize the more I actually go to gym, the more physical activities I do, I tend to wake up early because of that or something. And by the time I'm not like, I'm not all in my optimal zone, so I need to sleep earlier than what I do. Like I sleep at 12 or 1, right? So I need to start sleeping at 11 or something to get about I don't know, 8 or 9 hours of sleep, I guess. But again, still we can like do 1 or 2 hours of stream, not a big deal there though. And I think my capacity to stream longer is also increasing. So like, yeah, so have you ever wondered, like, let's come back to the topic now, have you ever wondered like why rich people gets richer and why poor people just remain poor? Because today in this video we're going to be like, let me look at show you something. Like, this is what we actually did yesterday, right? We kind of like understood how complex systems interact within themselves, and now we're gonna like through feedback and how they manage themselves using feedback. And it's actually pretty good. But now we're gonna understand why rich people get richer and why poor people get poorer. Let me just quickly select my stream to actually see the chat views, and yeah, everything's going fine. Let me just type hello in the chat. Hello, baby. Okay, not baby, but hello, everyone. How are you? How are you guys? Okay. So, okay, I think we already got that. So, yeah. I just need to check my audio input. Yeah. So, as you guys can already see, feedback. We are on feedback. Yep. So I think the topics is pretty clear on the topic, and I think there's one little thing that we have to change, because it's not day 2 actually; it's day 3 now. So, okay, yeah. So we've already got the entire thing going on with ourselves. So it's now time to read the thinking and system book, right? So as you've already known, like what stocks are just, let me give you a quick summary. Like, stocks are anything that can, like, everything is a stock, from like from mouse to keyboard to like everything from atoms in a, like, yeah, from air in a room to the states, the neurological state, everything can be seen as stocks and how they interact, right? Stocks are constantly trying to maintain themselves using feedback. So they maintain themselves if they rise to, with, like, if they move beyond bounds, let's say 400 and 800, if they move above 800, there's a control mechanism that keeps it within bounds, and that's what we call feedback. So as soon as it like reaches or goes against a certain bound, it gets feedback and it corrects itself, right? It's a correcting thing, right? Sometimes it doesn't correct itself. If when it corrects itself, it becomes a stabilizing feedback loop. When it doesn't correct itself and it just keeps on, like, coming out of bounds and bounds and bounds, that's become a runaway feedback loop. Let me show you something really awesome though. Right, let me explain it to you. But before that, I mean, I need ChatGPT to answer a couple of my questions first. I mean, we need him, right, guys? ChatGPT, could you actually explain runaway feedback loop in just one line? I think I should yep, set my phone on do not disturb, right? Oh, actually, I said runaway feedback loop. Yeah, so in runaway feedback loops, what happens is that most of the time the stock just keeps on getting out within bounds, and each time it gets out within bound, it accelerates its ability to come out of bounds. So for example, you have money in a bank account, let's say 400, 800. So each time it kind of like comes out of the bound of 400, because there's no stabilizing feedback that kind of like keeps it within bounds, right? So it constantly either keeps on increasing or it constantly either keeps on decreasing. And each time it increases its own ability to increase. Each time it decreases, decreases its own ability to increase. Or like, yeah, so each time it increases its ability to increase. Each time it decreases its ability to increase, right? Yeah, something like that, right? So actually, like what I'm doing, like currently I'm getting feedback onto like what I'm saying or something, right? Because you're very close, but there's a subtle distinction that matters. A runaway feedback loop is not simply going out of bounds. It's when the rate of change itself becomes self-reinforcing. So each time you change more. I see. So it's a self. Oh yeah, that's actually a new insight, right? But the thing is, like in the book, they don't talk this way actually, right? So like ChatGPT is not on the screen. If you're trying to find out it's on the screen, it's not. It's on my other screen, right? Because there's some personal chats in the ChatGPT about a life and stuff like that. So that's why showing it to. It's not a bad deal or something, but yeah, I can show it like, anyway. So it says like 400 earns 10% 40 gain. Now you have 440. 440 earns that's 44 gain. Now you have 484. Like yeah, so it's self reinforcing, right? If you do not know what's self reinforcing, I'll explain that later. Don't worry. And then the balance crossing boundary. The important thing is like the larger strong becomes, the more it generates, which makes it larger still, even larger. Your intuition can be refined. I don't know if you force changing the system increases on future rate of change acceleration in the same direction. The reverse is also true, that accumulates interest. Except bounds. Growth or decline, right? So now I'll explain you what my friend ChatGPT just said, and what runaway feedback loops are actually in essence. Right. So, for example, okay, articulating it would be hard, but we can do it nonetheless. Okay. So now imagine, my friend. Okay, the screen was not selected. Right. So we have. Let's just zoom in a little. So we have this thing here, right? And let's just take it. So this is. Let's just say this is money, right? So money. So it's like the money you have, and now there's like interest. I mean, like one of the biggest or simplest example, if I were to take, it would be something like this. Like look at what's happening here, right? You have 400 rupees in your bank account, right? And with the 10% of interest, it becomes like 40 gains. Now it's 440, right? And with more 10% of interest, that's 44. On 440, we did a 10% of interest, and that's 44, so 484. This is exactly what Donella shows in this diagram, right? Where is it? This. Like look at what happens here. Like each time you just have a you start with 10, right? But with 2% interest rate, you can see like it starts with 100, becomes like 126. But with 10% interest rate, after some times, you can see it starts to skyrocket, right? It starts to. I think after like the 10% interest just keeps on making it bigger over time. Now you'll say, okay, why it's making it bigger? Because first of all, you start with 400, you got 10% interest on it, that gives you 40, like yeah, interest. So now you have 440 in the bank account. So now 10% interest applies to 440, that gives you 44, which 484, and now for like 10% of 484, right? That would be somewhere about 480, like yeah, 48 or something. And that 48, like, so now you'll have like a, so we can just copy this up, control C, control V. So now it's 4A4 on 10%, right? Once again, you have 10%. Where's the percent logo? Okay, yeah, here it is, 10%, which gives you 48, or somewhere around 48, not exactly, yeah, or maybe 48.4, right? Okay. So it gives you 48.4 or something, right? This is gain. My math is not good, but this is gain, all right? And now what happens over time is like this is approx. So now what happens over time, this becomes like a, like, as you can see, it's like, it's increasing. It's increasing, right? So now what we have is like 40, like 484, and if we just open up the calculator and we just do 484 plus 48, that's like 532, right? So that's like, now we have 532, and now interest applies to 532, right? And actually, if we can do it mathematically, I think we can find out if it's 40 plus x equals 44 plus x equals 48. I think we can do mathematically, try to find out like at the rate at which it's increasing, right? I mean, we can definitely do that, but yeah, I'm not that good of a mathematician, like I said, so we won't be doing that or trying to do that. I think we can use ChatGPT to do that, but then again, it's not that big of a deal. So as you can see, what happens over time is like we're gonna understand its stock, right? So you have money, right? And this money, like, there's an inflow and there's an outflow, right? So what happens is like, it's like you have money and you have interests, right? Or I should just take the analysis. Yeah, here. So there's capital, there's investment, right? So you can just take this as interest, like the interest on this money, right? So because of interest, money keeps on rising, right? So because of interest, we can say money keeps on rising, right? So because of interest, money keeps on rising. And because of money, interest keeps on rising, right? This is where it starts to get interesting, right? Interest increases the money, money increases the interest, which goes on to increase more money. Imagine this. You have a, like, look at the room, look at my room, right? You have good books at the back, let's say. Good books increases my intelligence, which increases my ability to make money, which increases my ability to buy better books, which increases my intelligence even more. See what I'm saying? It's like one thing increases the another, and that another thing increases that one thing that increases the another. As simple as that. This is where rich gets richer. This simple thing on the screen explains a lot of society and a lot of civilization. This simple thing on my screen right now, right? Because a lot of time in life, what happens is like something amplifies. So I'm like kind of like doing YouTube, so I have a camera there, I have a mic, right? I have like all this. But imagine if I had a trash camera, if I had no mic, if I had no money, right? So I wouldn't be able to stream, right? So having good equipment allows you to stream, which allows you to earn money, which allows you to have even better equipment, which allows you to like have even better stream, which allow you to have more money. Like, look at here, right? So a system I have, all right, let's say a system is allows me to like like, let's say stream, which allows me to, let's say, earn even like money, right? Wait a sec, what I did wrong. Money, right? So if you have a, like, if you have a system that allows you to have money, that if you have system that allows you to stream allows you to get money, right? And now what happens now, once you have money, now here's the best part: once you have money, money allows you to get a better system, right? So money allows you to get a better system, right? Yeah. So if you were to just look at this, what's happening here is that you started with, you can use a system to make it. Now you'll say, okay, but there's no stock that's feeding onto a stream. Of course not. We are just trying to look at the connection. This is not how like the system is like inflow or the money is there, like but you can see how multiple systems are starting to connect, and we are using this without the stock. But then again, interest, like interest on money in itself is some sort of a stock that actually increases the money itself. So it's like, the capital, and how there's an like interest on capital, which increases the capital recursively, right? And always remember, these diagrams that we make are simple versions of reality. They do not represent reality accurately, but they represent it to some degree. So let's say if you do not have system, you just delete it. So now what happens? There's no stream, there's no money, right? Simple as that. But let's say you had some money. Let's say you had some money. You bought a system, right? You bought a system, and because of that system, you can stream, and because of that stream, you had more money. See the thing. That's why rich gets richer, because you had money. Let's say I had money, and I had interest, which gave me more money. But I can just start with something else entirely. Let's say I had money, right? I had money. Once again, okay, it's like there's just some learning curve to this. Like, okay, I have money that allows me to, let's say, invest. As simple as that. I have money that allows me to invest, right? And that investment, you would say, okay, well, what's up with this investment? That investment gives me more money because now I can invest, right? So, and now I store that money that I earn to invest more, and then I gain interest on it too. So I have money, I invest, I gain more money, but at the same time, that money in the bank account has interest. So I can say, okay, like I have, and okay, man, I'm getting this wrong. I'm getting this application wrong. I have interest. Okay, that is, yeah. Oh, I've written interset. Didn't realize that till now. That was a big problem, but it's all right. Yeah. So if you actually notice that, it's all right. There's no one in the stream to correct me there. But yeah. So if I had interest, this investment increases my interest because it proportionally increases my how would I say, money, right? So interest increases, so it's proportionally increases my like money. So it's like, how can we say, so it's like it's self-reinforcing, right? So and this happens not just in money, right? It happens in population. So if I have, let's say, like humans, right? If I have a, let's say, 1,000, like I have humans give birth, we all know that. So humans, like there's an outflow, which is death, but there's an inflow, right? So humans constantly give birth to someone. So it's like birth rate, which is like the birth rate. And so birth rate, because of the birth rate, there's more humans, right? Right. And then there's death rate too, right? So we have to actually keep that in mind. Right. So now we have death rate and we have birth rate. So each time you give a birth, like let's say to a human gives birth to another human, which becomes like, so it kind of self-reinforcing. So the more the humans you have, the more the birth rate there is, which leads to even more humans. So it's like self-reinforcing. Self-reinforcing pretty much means it reinforces itself. That means it keeps on making itself stronger and stronger. It perpetuates, right? So so you can say that runaway feedback loop is a process where the output increases the system ability to produce more of the same output. That's exactly it. Output means like more humans. So now the more the humans there are, the more the birth rate there is, which allows us to create even more humans, which allows us to even have a higher birth rate, which allows us to have even, so it's like the more, it's like a system, right? But then there's death rate too, and death rate acts as a stabilizing feedback. It constantly tries to chip down humans, but then again, birth rate far surpasses the death rates. If death rates and birth rates are equal, the human population would be like not that much, but the birth rates are higher, which is like the chico that we have. Like birth rates are way higher than death rates. Death rates are really low, right? So death rates are really low. So this is how the system functions, because like damn, yeah. I just wanted to make that, you know so this is how the system functions. If you guys have any doubt, you can type that in chat. In the future, if I see, like, I can see the chat and the comments, I will just respond them, because right now there's no one in the chat, which is all right. But if you still have some doubts related to it, or if you just want to target something, or if you want to make me or give me nuances, or if you think there's somewhere I'm wrong, you can definitely tell me something like that. Right. But here's the thing. I mean, this is runaway feedback loops don't always increase. Like, this is a misconception. They always and can definitely decrease, right? So, like, now we would say, okay, how? And I'll say the answer is simple. Have you seen Japan's birth rates are declining? Like, why? Hey, guys, can you explain? Like, why is Japan birth rates are declining? So now you'll say, okay, why is that happening? So let's understand from a systems perspective, right? Let's get that from systems perspective. Right. So if you have what I say, a population in which, like, okay, here's the thing, in Japan, like, the prices are skyrocketing. So let's say you have a kid, right? What happens is, like, you have money, for example. Let's say you have money. I think modeling that on here would be hard. Let me think how I would do that. Okay. I think you can go like this. So you have living expenses, right? So you have living expenses. Uh, yep. You have living expenses. So now here's, let me just go with that. So two, and we can have money and, okay. Okay, but living expenses is not. Okay, so job acts as a inflow, right? Because of jobs, you have money, right? So because of job, outflow happens as like living expenses, right? So whatever your living expenses are, right? So now what happens? Like, you get a job, you have money, and then you have living expenses that you actually constantly, you know. So now what happens is, like, Japan is stuck in this runaway feedback loop where jobs increasingly are paying less and less. Why jobs are paying less and less? Because the more population there is, the less job available there will be, right? So it's like population, like, so Japan had a specific population, and the jobs, like, starts to, there's a lot of migrants, and like, like, people who come from different country also getting jobs. So, like, the jobs is, like, getting less and less and are paying less and less. So we can just pretty much say that jobs are decreasing, or if not decreasing, paying less, right? So because there's more competition, there's more people, so jobs are paying less. What happens? Because jobs are paying less, the money that people earn is getting less, and living expenses are simultaneously rising because there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of, like, like, international companies that are earning. So, like, living expenses are constantly rising, money is decreasing. So now what happens? People had to cut down on living expenses to save money, of course. So they have to cut the outflow. So they cut the outflow, right? But if they can't cut the outflow, let's say they can't, because they earn, let's say they earn about $1,000. Let's say they earn about $1,000, and living expenses and the rent expenses and or everything that comes out is like $900, right? $900. That's what their, like, actually outflow is, and what this is what the inflow is. So now what happens? A money also actually goes on to what we call child, CHILD. Right. So now what happens? If you have a child, you would need money to raise them. Like, let's say you would need money to raise them. But over time, because the living expenses are rising and the money is decreasing, they cannot invest that much money onto the child. They just can't. So there's two options: either to cut out all the living expenses and start actually raising the child, or to actually get the living expenses and not to raise the child to begin with. See, raising a child in Japan is an economic suicide. This is what actually researchers and economists talks about. Because here's the problem: the jobs in the competition is just like, the competition is just rising in Japan. The jobs are paying less and less. The living expenses are just rising and rising if you want to live in Seoul or something. So because of that, you have no choice but to actually cut down on children, not because you want to cut down on children, but because if you don't, you commit an economic suicide, or yeah, you have no money left. So you can't invest that money. And so because like, education of children, education takes a lot of money, because education is becoming expensive, right? So if we actually see that, like, because like, schools are getting better. So if you have this is edu, like, let me just you know okay, let's not meddle education to begin with. Like, we can just say that if education is expensive, it will take a lot of money for the child to raise, because like, yeah, so if education is increasing, right? So I can just do it like this. So if yeah, so if education is increasing, right, guys? So if education is increasing, you cannot raise the child because the money you have is constantly decreasing, whereas the food, the clothes, the every X, Y, and Z stuff from the child is just keep on increasing. The expenses are increasing, so of course for the child it's also keep on increasing. And then you have a partner that, let's say, doesn't earn money, so taking care of that partner would also be a lot of economic cost on your budget. So that's why you don't actually have children. And now people would say, oh, the other people are not having children because they are not actually correct or morally correct, because a lot of religious people would think that having children is necessary, and if you're not having children, that's a very bad thing to do. But they are not doing it because they generally want to do that. They're doing it because having a children in Japan is an economic suicide, because living expenses are rising, jobs are decreasing, competition is increasing. That's it. That's why sometimes what we see is like, we can blame the people of Japan all we want for not having children and not thinking about the future, but they are not doing it because they want to do it. They are just doing it because system and the feedback loops are designed in such a way that there's no way for them to not do this. See, that's why thinking system matters a lot, right? It tells you what happens behind the scenes, behind the curtains, how systems are actually functioning rather than what you think. Because a lot of people, a simplest a simplest example would be that, oh, the people of Japan don't want kids, or they are morally are like, all right. But sometimes system just happens to be in a way where it's almost impossible to escape the attractors that people find themselves in, because it's just like, yeah. But we can also happen about how attractors forms and how different things like that forms from cybernetics, but we are not going to talk about that today. For some reason I just wanted to look at my beautiful face. I don't know why, but yeah, right. So this is what's happening with them, right? Yeah, and here's another example. The more there is, the more is added. This kind of growth is called exponential. So it's like the more machines in the factories, collectively called capital, you have, the more goods and services output you can produce. The more output you can produce, the more you can invest into new machines and factories. The more you make, the more capacity you have to make even more. But here's the thing: this doesn't happen all the time, because even if you can increase the output that increase must actually leads to more capital. So that means there must be demand in a market. So the more you can produce, the more there will be people to consume it. The more there will be people to consume it, the more you'll get the money. The more you'll get the money, the more even more you can produce. And if you can produce even more, then there should be even more people to consume it. Here's the thing: if there's no market for it, like, it's a simplified version of that. Of course, we are not saying this is the most complex version, but it's like, if there are, like, because if multiple feedback loops like connected, like if one leads to this leads to that, there's always like, if it needs to loop, we need to see, okay, if there is a big demand in market, so what happens if you're actually even if you start small, you can actually get it big, because there's always, sooner or later, you're gonna run into a runaway loop of exponential growth, just like how we see, like, here in the investment, like just how we're seeing it right now here, like, just how we're seeing it right here, right? Like, if you, because like, but like, a runaway loops takes time to like, yeah, kickstart. You can see 12 years, right? Like, you start with 100, and it took like a 12-year times to actually for it to triple, right? But if we increase the interest, like, let's not increase the interest, let's just increase the amount. Let's say we started with 30 lakhs, right? And or we started with $30,000. That $30,000 became three times. That's $90,000. Now you'll say, oh, it's tripled, but it doesn't seem much. And now that $90,000, 12 years later, become three times. So that's 90,000 into 90, 90, and 90. How much that would be, guys? 90, 180, 270. So that's $270,000. Now triple that, and that is like six, like, okay, into three. So that's 7, 7, 7, 21, 2, 6. Right, and 6 plus 2, that's 81. So that 800,000. So that's $800,000, and now triple that. Right. So that's one, like, over a million. So it's like 12, 24, 36, 48. Right. So in about a 50, 60 years, you would have a guy with $1 million who just started, over $1 million, who just started with $30,000. And now imagine you started with $1 million, triple that. And now you started with $100 million, triple that. Right. You see, the more you have, let's say you have $100 million, the more you can produce. This is the main thing here. Right. So, so yeah, remember that. This is like a good example that they give here. It's like how, yeah, the output, it goes back as a new input. So output becomes the next input. This is what we call, like, this is closed loop in cybernetics too, but yeah, we're not going to talk about that because cybernetics is the next book that we're going to talk about in this channel, which is another awesome book which talks about almost everything. Like, yeah, it's going to be banger. But yeah. Okay. It's been half an hour since I've speaking, so let's just take a 5-minute break. Actually, not. Let's not take a 5-minute break. I just fell. Try thinking about. Now this is okay. This is actually a good thing. Like, look at the slide. Like, if I could actually make you guys see it better. Right. So what Donella says here, which is like a gold, if not two. When someone tells you like population growth causes poverty, you'll ask yourself how poverty causes population growth. So, okay, so if you have poverty, you cannot have condoms. Yeah, literally, you cannot have condoms. So a lot of sex that happens in with prostitutes and in a lot of clubs and things like that happens with a condom. And like, yeah, a lot of cheating happens with a condom. Take away that, and now you don't have the ability to stop kids, right? So that's one thing. So you need that, like, you need like a production, a company to actually say, if there's poverty, there's no company that can produce condoms, and if there's no company that can produce condoms, I mean, like, okay, population is gonna skyrocket because a lot of time people have sex for fun, a lot of time, and each time you are having a sex for fun, I'd never had sex in my life, but if you are having sex, like, because I'm not that age yet, but if you are like, I'm 18, but and I'm getting 19 next month, so yeah, but if you are not having sex, like, for real, I mean, like, because, like, yeah, that's just because the more poor you are, the more the less things there are that can entertain you, right? There's no social media, there's no phone, or, like, let's say, so only thing that is really, really entertaining and extremely entertaining, if not really entertaining, is like a porn, right? Or not porn. Actually, porn is like a talk for online porn, right? So it's sex, actually, not porn. So that is like, so because you're poor, there's nothing in your environment or surrounding that is entertaining. So no good food, no good house, no good. So only thing that's actually genuinely pleasurable that you have access to is just happen to be your wife and sex. So that increases too. And then there's condom. So there's two things: no good things happening in your life, no traveling, nothing. So all you do is, like, all you can do is, like, think about sex, right? It's like no good games, nothing that actually keeps you entertained, no good movies. So yeah, that's one thing. Not having condom is another thing. And now what happens is, like, when you're poor, having multiple children means having multiple children to, like, to work for you, right? So you have more labor. So that is like what you can, a poor person thinks, and poor people thinks in labor, not in terms of intelligence. They're like, oh, there's more people to work, that means they're more money, right? So they have more money, so that is another reason that we have here, right? So they would think as their children, so that's another thing that plays a role onto like why they will have children, right? So that is like thing. But then again, there's these disadvantages too. There's extreme hunger, because a lot of time when you have a lot of people to feed too, you just can't actually sustain a life like that. So there's that problem too. So there's multiple different problems that actually stops them from having a lot of kids, because there's always, remember, if there's a reinforcing loop, there's always somewhere in the background there's a balancing loop. Because if there's not a single balancing loop, having children would skyrocket, and poor people would have hundreds of children. But they don't have like that. They have like 4 or 5, and some extreme cases 10 children. But that happens, but that, because there's a balancing loop. If that Because there's only so much a woman can actually give birth to, there's only so much food, there's only so they stop down. So there's something that is stopping them from having infinite babies, right? Always remember that. There's energy constraints, there's time, there's there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the background, guys. So yeah. Right. Okay, now this is like, yeah, the goal of the basic yeah, basic element, and simple and few as possible without having to turn the adequate representation of experience. Exactly, Albert Einstein, you said it the right, buddy. The compression matters the most. And now this is another balancing feedback loop. So you have a right, you have a heat from a furnace, like a stock with two competing balancing loops. So not just one, but multiple balancing loops simultaneously happening. So like she gives Donella is giving example of that. So you have a heat from a furnace, like, and you have room temperature, just like how I have air conditioner, right? So it kind of like cools the room, and heat from the outside actually makes the room hot. So you have like one, like, but then you can add thermostat, right? The ACs like actually can understand, like they have a thermostat. So if like the room gets really cold, like I selected for 27 degrees Celsius or something, and it realizes, oh, it's getting like, really cold, and it stops like cooling. So we have that. So thermostat's kind of like tries to maintain, right? They're like, so it's like the discrepancy between desired and actual room temperature in the thermostat, because thermostat is right now deciding that for us, because we choose what it needs to, like, decide. So kind of like, yeah, so that's one loop, that's one balancing loop built in the air conditioner. So like you don't have to even look at this. Like you have, let me just draw it for you guys so that you can understand it more. So this is control Z. So this is like the AC, and I guess, yeah. So we have AC, right? And let me take some infer. Oh yeah, so we are looking. I think the perspective from which you are actually looking at, it's also important. Because the thing that is being balanced is not the AC. Like AC is doesn't have to do anything with the stock. I actually got another insight that I didn't know. The thing is, the point is here and here and here is like, this is true. The job do leads to increase in stock called money, right? And system stream money. This example is not the best example. Why, you would say? Because it should be stock centric, not a system centric, not a you don't have to show the mechanism. This is like how stream gives, like, okay, it should be stock centric. So from stock centric out, this one's stock centric, this one's stock centric, this one is stock centric. So from stock centered perspective, what I'm trying to say, guys, is like, anytime you're viewing a system, the best thing you can do is to actually look at it from the perspective of a stock. Do not say how a human maintains money. Think like how money maintains a human. Only then you get another level of insight and ability to see what you weren't able to see before. Oh my god, this is something I didn't realize. Yeah, like, yeah. So let's just see it in terms of room temperature. I think this is what Donella does the best. So room temperature. So we have room temperature, and then we have like a, if the let's say, and now think in terms of what happens to this, what control mechanisms. Oh my god, oh fuck, here I should have think too. If the money is too like high, it goes on to living expense. If the money is too, okay, think in terms of, I was thinking in terms of job and living expenses, and like, yeah. So yeah, money rises too high. Yes. Yeah, man. Had to do some little bit thinking. So if the all right, so there's an outflow and there's an inflow. So it's like if the room temperature is too cold, we have a discrepancy, right? So if the I mean, that's how she draw it. I mean, you don't necessarily have to draw it this way. So we have discrepancy, or we can just call it a gap between what we want and what we actually have, and that gap causes the like our we have like what do you say, like a regulator, like regulator which you call a thermostat, which regulates temperature. So we have a regulator. I don't have a pen. I think I need a wake pan, like, but I can't convince my dad. Regulator. I'm like, yeah, no one allows you to stream, like, your family wants you to study, but I am studying, but this is not what they want you to study and go to college or something. But so you have a regulator. Okay, I just can't draw it, guys. But whatever, you have a gap, and like, let's say there's a thermostat. Like, this is the thermostat. Okay, this is not a thermostat. That is everything but a thermostat. Okay, so this is something that regulates, like, that's like a detector that detects the room temperature. So it detects the gap, right? Just like how Donella does it. So it detects that gap, right? It detects that gap. And what happens when that gap happens? It decreases like the supply of the cold air. So it balances the room temperature, right? And if like, so yeah, so there's this one thing that balancing it, right? So this is like what gives, like, what is like the air that comes from like, from this air conditioner AC, like, into the room, and now it goes to the outside. So outside loop is like, so like it's constantly flowing out, right? Yeah, so there's discrepancy, there's a gap between the what the room inside is, like this inside and outside. So yeah, so each time there's a gap, the airflow from low pressure to high pressure, something like that, or like, it doesn't necessarily even have to be that. It's just moved from one place to another. You can just see in that way. So there's another gap here, and that gap causes it to go outside. Like, yeah. So you have heat to the outside. Oh, and actually, yeah, I'm understanding more of this stuff. So you have heat to the outside, but I mean, I can just say this is like heat to the outside, and this is like air, or not heat exactly. Here it's like air condition. I have cold air, so cold air to the outside that's going outside, or the cold air from outside that is also coming inside. So there's this cold air that, like, from the outside comes inside, and there's like cold air from the inside that goes outside. So like, yeah, we have multiple things here. Yeah, man. Actually, the thing is, like, I haven't read after any of this. Like, this is like all the marking that I did, but I think after, like, yeah, certain, like, this chapter wasn't something I read a couple of times. I just like did a, yeah. So after that point, like, yeah, I think all of the markings are off. I mean, I would be reading live with you guys, and we would all be reading together, understanding what the book is trying to say to get the maximum asymmetric information out of it. So yeah, detects discrepancy. This is the only truthful thing. That turns on the heat flow from warming the room, and the room temperature rises again. The thermostat turns off the heat flow, right? Stock maintaining, like, this is straightforward stock maintaining balancing feedback loop ensured on the left side of the figure. Yeah, this is where nothing else in the system. And if you start with a cold room with a thermostat of set at 18 degrees Celsius, it would behave as shown in the figure. Uses the thermostat, the furnace goes off, the room stay right at the temperature. However, this is not the only loop in the system. Heat leaks to the outside by the right side of the finger. Right. There's like coffee cooling, right? There's a balancing feedback loop, something that stop it from, like, if it's too cold, it makes it hot, because, like, yeah, the balancing feedback is like, there's discrepancy of the gap between the outside heat and the inside heat of the, like, yeah, the temperature of the coffee. And like, yeah, if you remember, if you just take a coffee, right, if I just let's say, oh, it shows an error, guys, wait a sec. YouTube Studio, what? Hello. What's happening? What's happening? It says network quality is poor. What? Damn. Viewers will experience buffering. Okay. I mean, it's not like anyone's watching the stream, honestly. Right. But I guess, yeah, can't fix that. Oh, it got fixed now. So I think it just happens to be with a, like, yeah. Yeah, I was like wondering for no reason, worrying for no reason. Yep. So heat leaks to the outside. The outflow is like heat. So yeah, and there's one thing I realized. Like when I actually set my AC. Now here's the thing. I'm trying to balance, right, my room temperature, but I'm not able to do so. When I'm at 27, it's slightly hot. Right, and when I'm 26, it's slightly colder than what I want. That means that's why like look at it. I'm maintaining like the levels of stock of the room so that I could maintain the level of stock within my body, right? So I'm trying to maintain a certain room temperature, but I'm not able to do so. And why I'm trying to maintain that is to maintain my body temperature, and I'm failing at that. See, it's like you have loops, couple of loops going on. Like first of all, you have a loop like the AC that constantly checks if the room temperature is certain level. Then I that constantly check if the room temperature is certain level that I want it to be. And then there's a body that actually is constantly checking within me if the room temperature or the surrounding temperature is within the bounds that it needs. There's multiple rooms interacting with each other, and now I'll say like that I was the one who chose, but it's like my body already choosing for me what the room temperature I need, and I'm just acting upon that instinct or the desire, right? And actually changing the temperature of the AC again and again, even while I'm on a stream. See, so it's like how multiple systems, a biological system, a mechanical system, constantly trying to maintain stock so that they can keep certain body temperature, certain room temperature within bounds. That's pretty much what we all are doing here, right? And this links to a company maintaining stock. This links to like everything. Like for example, if I just open up all right, I'm not gonna show it to you guys, don't like yeah. So if I were to say yeah, so it exists. Why does stock exist, guys? Because it exists to maintain mechanism. It works by maintaining stock, like, and actually, it's not just about like this is a feedback loop. Feedback loop is just stock maintaining itself on the basis of detecting its inflow and outflow. So this me changing the room temperature is not just changing the stock, it's a feedback loop because it's looping and we are doing it again and again, right? Yeah, I think this I should close it now. So it's like everyone is trying to maintain certain levels of stock, right? A cold room warms quickly to the thermostat settings. A warm room very slowly to the outside temperature. Okay, a cold room warms quickly to thermostat setting. This is like how like cold air functions. You end up with a warm room, even starting with the cool room or the cool air. Yeah? I've already read it. Feedback loop. The more the water in the bucket, the more the water pressure at the hold holds to the flow or increase. In this case, we are trying to keep the room warmer than the outside. Thanks for the fun. Yeah, this is like yeah, future behavior. It can deliver that drove the current feedback. Even the non-physical information takes time for the feedback into. Now, this is actually really a good thing, which is what they're pretty much trying to say. Is like, you cannot actually. Okay, whatever. You cannot actually change what happened in the past, because it's like it takes time for the feedback to arrive, and when the feedback has arrived, and when you realized how a system's actually maintain itself, that is like the the real thing is, because once you, because here's the thing, even if the feedback arrives, it arrives like what happened has happened, right? So for example, even if I now know that the room temperature is like not within the bounds and not within the thing that I want, it's already too, not too late, because like we can just say it, but like, but in complex systems, what happens when feedback arrives, it arrives too late, right? So for example, you have a guy, right? From feedback, you can also think in terms of information and how information flow happens. So imagine a guy, he's like constantly trying to gain muscle, he's constantly like working out, and there's a loop, right? Like we'll look at from the muscle centric perspective. So we have a muscle, muscle, right? And each time, like, you know, the like each time he realized that there's not enough muscles, what that person does is like there's a gap between, okay, there's a there's a gap between what he wants and what he has, which we call discrepancy, like you guys know. So what he does is like right. So what he does is because of this gap, he constantly trying to exercise more, right? But one day he woke up and he realized the reason why he never was able to increase. So he's like keeping on doing this exercise more and more and more, but the muscles are not increasing. And after sometimes he quit. Now you'll say, okay, Varik, why did he quit? And the reason what stock never increased, so he realized his hard work was not paying off, and human systems happen to maintain. Let's say, for example, you have energy. Think in terms of this again. You have energy, right? Energy, right? And body, humans, yeah, humans is always caring or thinking about something, and but that is energy to return ratio. Now, what is energy to return ratio? In simple terms, it's biological, but it's like how much energy did I invested onto something and what I gained. This is what we even can call meaning making, like how we make meaning or sense of things. So, for example, why are you going to school? Okay, I am going to school because I need to get a degree, because education is considered really important. Because so there's energy. So what do I get after going to school? So it's like how much energy, how much returns do I get on to the energy that I invested? Just think in that terms. So I invested about 3 hours of my energy onto Instagram of doom scrolling, and I realized I achieved nothing and I feel like shit, right? And there are times, oh, I studied for 6 hours a day, I invested my energy meaningfully, I feel really good, right? So what he's gonna do, he's constantly applying energy onto something, right? There's constantly an outflow, right? So there's constantly an outflow, and there's like a gap between like the returns he want and the returns he gets, right? So there's like a constantly applied, and there's like returns, we can say. So there's a gap, right? So now this, where's this energy comes from? Like it comes from food and all that. We are not going to think about that right now, because like, yeah, we are not actually representing the entire thing. There's a gap. Yeah. There's a gap, right, between the returns and between the outcome. So because of this gap over time, what happens, this gap is like constantly causes, like, you know, because there's no, like, let's say after sometimes there's no output because there's no gap. Like, let's say the output is 0, right? So that means all of the energy is giving no return. So over time, the systems keep on desiring this, like, you know, checking this gap. Okay, how much energy I'm investing and how much returns am I gaining? It's constantly maintaining or trying to maintain, like, you know, think in terms of stock. And this feedback loop causes it to take this energy was going into, because now you'll say, okay, where is this energy going? This energy is directly going here, right? So it's like this energy is going here, and it's like constantly checking. Like there's one system that's constantly checking energy to return, and like there's one system that's constantly checking the muscle. And then I realize, okay, I'm putting all this energy trying to gain muscle, but I'm not gaining the muscle. This is why a lot of people think the reason they quit gym or sports or high forms of activity is because they are not disciplined, but sometimes it's like what they're doing is doing wrong, right? So let's say, for example, you're investing like a lot of energy into something that doesn't work out. You're investing a lot of energy into the business. You're investing a lot of energy in studying the wrong way. Let's say you're sleeping just 5 hours a day and you don't even have the energy, let alone get a high levels of return, right? And let's say you're going to gym, but you're actually doing cardio all the time. So there's cardio, right? Which definitely doesn't lead to muscles at all, right? So what happens? You start thinking that it's useless or it's pointless or something, and then you stop doing it over time because you okay, and then you realize okay, people with only protein shakes could actually get it. So it's like how a lot of biological systems are happening and interacting beneath the surface, and this is what's happening beneath the surface, but you are still thinking in terms of okay, naivety. You don't know what's happening behind the surface. You don't know why you quit. You don't know what feedback loops or what systems or how these systems or biological systems were interacting, but then you hallucinated a reality. This is what we call narratives, right? People constantly lie to themselves, right? Or they don't actively lie to themselves, they accidentally lie to themselves because they believe that what they believe in is true, and what's happening behind the surface is something entirely else in what they believe in. So each time there's a gap. What this gap does here, look at it, it's like energy. Each time there's a gap, like systems actually cut off the outflow. So it actually stops, right? If the gap is too much. Yeah. And that's why, like, sometimes, yeah. Now information arrives that, oh, the reason why the muscles weren't actually growing because I was doing cardio. But then again, you can't do anything about what happened in the past, you know? This is what she's saying. But now you can alter your future decisions. Now, guys, I need to go to washroom. I'll just be back in a minute, okay? Yeah. Yeah, guys, I'm back. Right. Mm-hmm. Kind of a back. Let's just drink some more. Uh-huh. Yeah, and this is what she gives a really good example. If you can look at this, yeah, if you look at this, it's like in the bathtub, it takes a split second of time to assess the depth of the water and decide to adjust the flows. Like there's an inflow and there's an outflow. We can literally like the flow is like yeah, what's coming in and what's going out. We can quickly actually decide to alter them. But when it comes to economies, when it comes to the gym cardio and muscle example, like for example the room temperature, I can just quickly decide to change the flows by pressing onto like a button of this remote, right? It just literally takes like a couple of seconds to do that. But sometimes when you're doing cardio or when you're like, in order to gain the muscle, you're doing it for weeks and only then you realize, okay, that the thing I was doing is wrong. And then you actually pivoted to, let's say, compound exercises like weightlifting like RDL, like in gym. When it comes to sports, let's say you were actually holding the racket, like on badminton court you were holding the racket the wrong way, and then you realize, okay, you need this forehand grip. Or let's say you were playing football, basketball, whatever, and then you were doing wrong, and only after a lot of time you finally realizing that you were doing something wrong. It takes a lot of time to goes back to like correct the errors. This is what she's saying. Many economic models make a mistake in the matter by assuming the consumption of our production can respond immediately, right? Say to the change in price. That one of the reasons why real economics tend to not to behave exactly like many. Is that you must remember in a thermodynamic system to take into account wherever they were. A little bit of the desired temperature. If you want to pay off your credit card or the national debt, you have to raise your repayment rate high enough to cover the charges you link on you. Yeah, if you have like to pay off your credit card debt, right? You have to raise your repayment rate high enough to cover the charges you incur while you're paying interest, including interest. If you are gearing up your workforce to a higher level, you have to hire fast enough to correct for those who quit while you are hiring. Right, so you have to keep on hiring fast enough before, like, yeah, in other words, your mental model of system needs to include all important flows. You will be surprised by systems behavior. Balancing feedback loop must have its goal set proportionally to compensate for draining. The feedback processes will fall short of or exceed the time. Strongman balancing feedback loop must have its goal set appropriately to compensate for draining. Target for the so there's a balancing feedback loop must balance both the inflow and the outflow. That's what she's pretty much saying. Yeah, so now they're talking about what dominates a loop. Now, this is where it's getting more and more interesting as the more time would pass by. So they're talking about, okay, like birth rates, like here in this stock, the reason why population keeps on increasing even though there's a stabilizing feedback loop like that, they're constantly trying to pitch it down, is because the loop of birth and compounding, like the birth giving more to birth, is dominates the system. That's what she's pretty much saying. And this is what causes like the population to just always keep on rising a lot of time, right? A population has a reinforcing loop causing it to grow through its birth rate, and a balancing loop causing it to die off through its birth rate. Right. So balancing loop, if of course that's right, and there's reinforcing loop, which is the birth rate. But the thing is, by balancing loop never catches up with the reinforcing loop of birth rate, is because like yeah, birth rate are less. But sometimes here's the magic part. Even if like the birth rate is like a reinforcing loop, if you actually increases the amount of deaths, then it becomes balancing. So if you can increase the amount of deaths by a lot, you would not have a reinforcing loop reinforce itself because you're cutting it off its power. Like yeah, for real. A population has a reinforcing loop causing it to grow through its birth rate. Yeah. Um. I mean, we have this scene in like a there's as soon as children are born, we have like neuroplasticity at its peak. So what happens to children is like this is like something slightly related to this, but not exactly related to this. But it's like children are exposed to social media, exposed to phone, and this kind of like destroys their attention span, right? And attention span are needed for work. So if you have attention span, your attention span is like, let's say, is like there's this one loop which constantly like here in this like there's this, if I were to draw it, like there's this Instagram here which causes like which actually controls it. Let's say here, like, so okay, right? And there's constantly like attention, hard work, discipline, stuff like that. They constantly improve your attention span. But there's constantly something like Instagram or something that constantly ruins it, your attention span. And you realize like how attention span is like an outcome. You realize that you want pleasure, right? Oh, now we are having a problem because attention span is linked with another stock, which is like you constantly chasing novelty. So the more you try to chase novelty, the more attention span decreases. All right. But it's like, okay, we have two systems here. I don't know how do you do that though? Like if I have this is exact problem that I came up here to, that I couldn't actually do it. And that's why I couldn't actually explain this in a right way, because you have like two systems. You are constantly trying to chase novelty. So like the more the novelty that you consume, the more novel things that you consume from Instagram. It could be like anything from YouTube or something, but yeah, novelty, like just pure novelty, like app, soft phone, like or any of sort of like that kind of stuff, like just movies, binging movies. So the more novelty you consume, the more attention span would decrease. But how do I link both of them? Like, do I just go it like this? No, I can't do that. Okay, I think she would teach us about in a couple of sec. Here. How multiple systems behave simultaneously. Or no, right now we are on like one centric system. So yeah, drawing it in that way would be hard, honestly. Yeah, I don't know how do we actually complete this. But in simple terms, the more novelty you chase, the because novelty is not a stock, so we cannot just literally draw it, right? Novelty is more like a state. All right, so like more time on Instagram. Actually, we can think in terms of time because we can have time. So it's like a if I have like time on Insta, which I can take as a stock, right? Because time on Insta, because you're of course not doing anything productive on Instagram, right? Unlike other like most of the people, some people are actually creating businesses there, and so your attention, the more time on Insta you have, the more attention span decreases, right? So actually, it would like I should delink them. Actually, Instagram is not actually getting influenced by that stock. Could you just come down here, my friend? It's like there's just a, how should I say? Like there's a gap between what you want, and there's a gap between, yeah. So there's two discrepancy. So like attention span is like constantly coming in through discipline, through hard work, through like yeah, through different stuff. Like if you were to say through studying, you're actually having better neural plasticity, through working out, like workout, not working out, and through multiple stuff like that, etc. Right? You're actually improving your focus by getting a good diet, by doing all the stuff that you need to do. All right. And there's something that is constantly leaking your attention span, and that is my friend here, right? So Instagram, right? So, but it's not just Instagram; it's like binge movies and Netflix and all that, right? So there's one thing that's constantly improving your attention span, and there's one thing that's constantly ruining your attention span. And as the more children are getting addicted to Instagram, the attention spans or ability to work hard or focus or stuff like that would definitely decrease. And everything, almost everything from businesses to markets to psychology to studying requires higher amount of attention span and working hard, but all of the stuff. But because they're binging Instagram for 6 hours a day, which pretty much is the dominant time of the day, because let's say they're sleeping between 6 to 8 hours. After that, they're watching Instagram for 6 hours, right? And 6 hours of school studying, which is pretty bad because education systems aren't the best thing you could bet at this civilization. So there's 6 hours at school, 6 hours, that's 12 hours, that's 18 hours, and the rest is like you know, okay, that's not eight actually, that's six. So yeah, it's 18 hours, and the rest 6 hours are like bathing, going with friends and stuff like that, eating food, just moving from school to coming back to school and stuff like that. So majority of the time of the day is either spent on school and on Instagram, or not on Instagram, maybe on Netflix and movies. And sometimes those 6 hours, like, are not actually invested into anything. Sometimes they're just wasted onto eating junk food, like doing pleasurable stuff, watching porn, doing X, like, going, doing cigarettes, doing beer, doing, going out and hanging out with friends, but not the normal hangout with the fun talk and nice, something like a parties and stuff like that. So they're just constantly doing things that are extremely pleasurable, which decreases not just attention span, but ability to focus harder, ability to do X, Y, and Z stuff. Like, so now what happens, you can pretty much see over time, if you actually do a 10 years, somewhere about how should I say, like if you do if you try to draw a graph, like let's say if you try to draw a graph, and here we can have like time, right? And okay, Control Z. Here we can have time, if that makes sense. And here you can have attention, okay, attention span. All right, guys. So over time, as they grow up, like, like they could start with a really good attention span, but over time, like it's gonna decline as the more time they spend. And over the years, this doesn't happen in a day, but over the years, the attention span would be so bad that just doing like the office work or something would be like all they could do, right? And especially the thing is, it happens like this is the problem with adults that actually get exposed to Instagram in this generation. They start with like, when you should be developing the attention span, you would never be able to develop it. It would just constantly be like struggle and fight with the world, and it would never become exponentially high. It would be just always and always like low, right? It would get higher sometimes when you're actually working out, but majority of the time, like the attention span that is required to build a business, like locking in 10 12 hours a day at a stuff, not going to parties, not doing anything, that kind of level would never be reached from the start. And here's the best part, like, the more their attention span degrades over time, the what happens is brain works on your plasticity, guys. This is not a brain, but if I were to draw a brain, like let's just imagine this is a brain. I mean, okay. Let's just imagine this is your brain. I know this doesn't look like a brain. Don't blame me. It's all right. Right. So what happens? Your brain have these neurons, right, which are connected to other neurons and dendrites, and yeah, there's this and there's like. Okay, I just don't know how to draw a neuron. Why it's supposed? I don't think so. It's supposed to be this hard, right? I mean, like, yeah. So this is your neuron. And these neurons, over time, what happens, since your attention span never decreases, and since you're constantly consuming like pleasurable things, right? All these pleasurable things, what your brain starts to do is actually never develops the neuroplasticity that is required to do like a hard stuff or something that requires a lot of attention. So over time, because of hard dense neuroplasticity, even if you want to do, and even if you stop doing this stuff, you can't stop doing it because it's like you're addicted and so used to it that not doing it feels like that. That's pretty much it. If you're addicted to sugary stuff, that's why people with diabetes will still keep on consuming sugar or sugar-free stuff. It's because they've been consuming it for decades now and they just can't stop. That's another thing that will happen because neuroplasticity plays a major role in this, right? If you know what neuroplasticity is. So I hope you get what I mean. So yeah, man, this is kind of detrimental for children in an upcoming generation. But I just don't happen to be those children, and I don't have an Instagram account, so I just like fuck. I'm not fucked, and that's all I care about, right? And that's all you should care about, I guess. Like yeah, it's fun. Even if no one's watching the stream, it's kind of a fun, right? Hmm. As long as fertility and morality are consistent, which in real system they rarely are, which you're true about it. So here you have like exponential growth, like because like there's death rates and like the birth rates are higher. Sorry, but now the death rates are higher. They have increased the death rates to, as you can see here, like yeah, to 30. Like I know it's really small to look at, so like yeah, so here they have increased like the death rate here in this graph, like as you guys can see, it's like increased to 30, right? And here on this graph they had like a 21 birth rates and I don't know 9 death rates or something. So over time you can see it's pretty much growing, like yeah, and I bet over the years it would become a non-linear explosion, right? Something like that. And here though it's like it's not non-linear, it's just declining over time. So yeah, and then you have like same amount of like birth rate and death rate, and it's like stabilizes. Like it's like nothing happening, no changes are happening, right? Things like that.